All right. Well, welcome to today's Kingdom Conversation. It's Dave at Crossway Vineyard Church in Urbana, Ohio. And I'm excited because joining me in this chat is somebody who I was just telling him has been really influential in both churches that my wife Shannon and I have been a part of, and has been a huge influence in my personal life in the way that I think about the kingdom and the way that we think about like the nature and the character of God. Like so, Steve Sjogren's with me on this chat. Steve, welcome.
Hey, thanks,
From
Dave.
you're in Los Angeles, right?
I am in LA. Yeah, and it's been horrible, terrible, no good, very bad weather for a while, raining about every 10 minutes or so. So I'm relating to Seattle people. Those guys have to be gutsy to live up there because it rains nonstop. And all these LA people
Yeah.
are pulling their hair out now, So it's a crack up.
Yeah, it's been kind of a cold like season for you guys too, right? Like it was unusually. Is that are you in like I'm going to be having a chat with a you might know him, Mike Safford up in Tehachapi Vineyard,
Yeah.
and so I've got a chat with him coming up. But like it's been unseasonably cold. Is that true for LA or is that more in the mountains?
Both and yeah. And yeah, it's there've been a number of people who gone hiking, for example. It just disappeared. A well-known British actor a few weeks ago, go up for the day kind of thing, and the weather turns and gets cold and snowy real quickly. And so it could be tragic, of course. And you hear about it nationally when it happens in LA, I guess, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's been cold for sure.
Yeah. Well, hey, I appreciate you taking time and
Mhm.
chatting with me today. Just for folks that are connecting, what I alluded to a few moments ago was the influence that you've had on my spiritual journey and churches that we've been a part of,
Mhm.
and just to kind of gives folks. Some context for that. Like Shannon and I was telling Steve a little bit ago that we came to know Jesus at 20 years old. We had just gotten married. And part of the realization I had at 20, I remember driving down the road and two things hit me. One was, oh my gosh, what did I do? I got married. like, and then, and then the other shortly after was, if I'm going to get this thing and do this marriage thing well, like I wasn't raised in your typical Christian home. I
Mhm.
like knew that God had to be the center like of
Mhm.
my life. And that had been the Holy Spirit, because like at 20, I wouldn't have figured that one out.
Yeah.
And like if I was going to be the husband that God intended me to be, or the father that God intended me to be, like God had to be the center of my affections. So
Mhm.
so we got to know Jesus, went to a Christian rock concert. 2 days later went into a church, and it ended up being, it was called the Wycliffe Chapel up in Lake County, Northeast Ohio. And they were
Sure.
transitioning into a Vineyard church, which I had never heard of. Vineyard didn't mean anything to me. A
Mhm.
friend just invited us, and the friend seemed pretty cool. And I
Mhm.
thought, well, that we'll give it a shot. And it was funny, like Steve. So it was either going to be the Wycliffe Chapel, or it was going to be this, like, again, religious words meant nothing to me
Mhm.
back then. Like it was that, or the name of the church was actually the Fundamentalist Church of Lake County. I didn't know what those things meant. Let's try this one first, and then then maybe we'll try the other one. We never made it to the other one.
It could be the
Um,
Funmost Vineyard once you transition completely over there. Just that'd be the only
could
one
be a
probably in the
new,
whole mix.
yeah, a new flavor. But so we were a part of that church for a bunch of years, serving with Brent and Teresa Paulson and the leadership there. And it's really the church that we learned uh, like what a Christian was, and we learned about the love of God. But what was like, what for Shannon and I, for what was really foundational, is that in those first couple years, our pastor Brent invited this friend he had from Cincinnati up to speak on like servant evangelism. And I didn't really know quite what that, but we were kind of doing that kind of thing a little bit, serving the poor. But
Mhm.
so Steve came up, and our life hasn't been the same. What
Mhm.
I was telling Steve was that like we saw modeled, because when Steve would come to do a conference, it wasn't just about taking notes and then going back to your Monday through Friday and made some really neat observations and notes in your Bible. Back then, we actually used paper Bibles. Like,
I remember those.
like, yeah, like Steve had us doing it. He had us go out and like serve the community as part of the. He's like, okay, we're gonna break up now and let's go like clean gas station bathrooms. And so that was like foundational for us. So I've been following Jesus for almost 33 years now, and it is still like it's more than just allowing application for our faith. It said something about the heart of God that was really foundational for us. So thank you, Steve, for being that kind of influence. I know I'm just one of many people, not just in the US, but around the world, that God has used you to really shape something for his kingdom. Thank you.
I ran into a guy, you want to hear a real quick 30-second thing? I ran into a German couple that had been at a Vineyard Bible School here in LA. And they were getting ready to go back to Germany. And I was been training and da-da. And she goes, were you ever in Bern, Switzerland, cleaning toilets? I said, yeah, about da-da. She started crying. My dad has been cleaning toilets. It was like 25 years ago or 20 years ago anyway.
Oh my gosh.
And she goes, I'm going to tell him he's faithfully cleaning toilets. That's pretty cool.
That is cool. It shapes something in us.
I'm picturing like a dictatorial German toilet cleaner coming in. Achtung, you shall stand there and I shall clean the toilet now.
Yeah, right.
Kind of a,
that's not clean.
Sergeant Schultz on a bad day, it's just.
Yeah. Now I will say the danger back then for, this may sound, I don't know, too gender biased, but the danger for guys was if you're married and you're out doing the cleaning toilets and stuff with your church, like your wife could like look at you when you get home and be like, we need you to apply some of that elbow grease stone. So,
for sure. I was at a conference one time with Rob Bell, you know that name, the guy that writes books about this and that. And we were doing a Q&A and a lady, some cotton picking, not minding her own business lady asked me a question. So do you clean toilets at your house? And it never occurred to me. I know I'm dense, but I've been cleaning since then. Not every 100%, but I'd say way more than half the time. And I've got my own little system going here, and I discovered new toilet cleaning equipment. It's wonderful.
That's great. And also car washes were big too at the time.
Yeah.
Like now as guys, we kind of gravitate to that, right? That's a bit more in our wheelhouse, but just doing free car washes. And I know you've got some stories around that and how that impacted community. In fact, I'm wondering maybe for some folks who might be sort of just connecting with some of these concepts, something I'm unpacking at Crossway Vineyard is like for this year, getting our heart around Romans 2:4, the fact that like it's God's kindness that leads to repentance, like it's God's kindness that changes culture.
That's
and
right.
So we're kind of getting our heart around that. Like, but I suspect, that for you in Cincinnati, and what was going on, kind of what God brought in through your leadership, and it began to change culture in Cincinnati. Like, I would suspect it was less about brainstorming strategies and throwing things against the wall. Like, well, maybe this servant thing might work to grow the church, right? It was probably a deeper journey for you and your leadership and your church, probably journeying as you were drawing close to the heart of God and like experiencing that. One of the things I've shared with church leaders for some years now, I think there can sometimes be an unhealthy focus on numeric growth, as though that's the ultimate goal. Right. And if that is, we're coming up way short. Like, because what we see in the Bible is like any numeric growth is a consequence of making a difference in our community. And I know, so like Cincinnati became probably the biggest Vineyard church at that time in the world, I would think. But like it didn't happen because you were in a boardroom, right? And like coming up with ideas. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it all kind of started at 5:30 or maybe 5:45 a.m. in January when we'd been here a couple of years in Cincinnati there, I should say. And I was frustrated to beat the band. I'd been a fourth grade teacher. I didn't really pursue that after a few years, got into pastoring, et cetera. And it hit me one day. I thought, I'm not really a fourth grade teacher any longer. I'm not really anything else. I'm kind of starting this little ragtag thing. It'll maybe become a church one day. But after 2 years, we had about maybe 2 or 3 dozen people. And having been in LA with the original Vineyard, not John Wimber's, that was actually kind of phase 2 of Vineyard World. And phase 1 was another guy named Ken Gullickson, who was not featured in the recent movie called Jesus Revolution, but he was the first assistant pastor that Chuck Smith hired back in the day. And Lonnie hit Frisbee, of course, is part of the whole story. On it goes, on it goes. Very interesting guy there. But Ken went up and started the Vineyard in LA proper, and on it went. And it was a to begin with. I get back to my story about Romans 2:4. I had an expectation of something amazing happening very quickly, and something amazing did happen, but it took a long time. I'm in the parking lot of my bus garage. That was one of my 3 jobs I had at the time. And I felt like God spoke to me and said, if you'll just serve the people of Cincinnati, if you wash their feet, if you don't worry about growing for Pete's sake, just go and love and plant lots and lots and lots of seeds of kindness, then you'll be amazed. You'll have a people problem, but it won't be no people. It'll be too many people. And so began, as you said, the car wash was our first project, and we had signs, free car wash, no kidding, no donations accepted, So you get curiosity seekers coming in, and pretty soon we had to change it to the $1 car wash because cheerleaders ruined it for everybody. They free for a donation. So we began to give people $1 for the privilege of washing their car. And talk about getting engaged emotionally. I'd say about 1/3 of the people start to get emotional. Like, really? Why would you do that? We just think Jesus would be cleaning, washing cars today if you were in town. And amazingly, well, maybe not amazingly, as a Christian, it seems amazing, but in light of the culture around us, I often hear, I've always believed in that kind of a Jesus. And almost like, Talladega Nights, the little baby Jesus he talked about, like we all have a different version of Jesus, of course. But I think that there's something in the heart of man. Ecclesiastes says that he's put eternity in our hearts. And I have to believe that people we touch with a little bit of kindness, the kindness of God that leads to repentance, it will bring them toward Christ, if not bring them to Christ, at the spot. But the end of that verse, actually, David, in it's the Peterson translation, the message. Thank you. It ends up saying that the kindness of God leads to, now get this, a radical life change, which is another way of saying repentance. And I've got to believe that as we do little bitsy things with whatever capacity we have, that God does something. He shows up and does the big stuff. And the longer I'm not pastoring right now. I'm kind of done with that part of my life. But the longer I was serving as a pastor, the more I began to be aware of the incredible responsibility, but at the same time, incredible opportunity and joy and all the positives too. But I know one thing for sure is when I'm out in the city serving, giving out Cokes, giving out water at red lights. I'm finishing my 3rd book of 101 ideas. And the new book is not out yet, but it's titled Unleashing Kindness, 101 Simply Profound Ways to Reach Your Community. Simply profound. Because it is it's not one-dimensional, but it's like, it's almost like a balsa wood glider. There are 2 little things you stick into it to make it fly, but yeah, there are 2 that you do that and you got it made, and so it's about as simple as a balsa wood plane, I'd have to say. And what we're seeing now is that if we could just do those little things with great love, as Mother Teresa said, then I think we're going to change the city, no matter where we are, no matter what our deal is. And
Yeah.
one of the things, Dave, I see that I now have seen it more clearly than ever before, is that pastors and leaders in general, but specifically pastors, have to force themselves into the community, or they will pastor the people to death. Lonnie Frisbee, I'll bring him up here. He said that the fivefold ministry, Ephesians, we hear talk about the pastor, teacher, but the fivefold ministry, the five offices, if you will, in pastor language, is pastor, 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 pastor. And so what we have to do as pastors to get out in the communities, to lead the way. We're the tip of the arrow, or the lead goose. How's that? Where the lead goose goes, so go the geese. And because I'm not really naturally an extrovert at all. I'm very much an introvert. I take personality inventories, always come up high introvert. And but at the same time, I love people. I've learned to love people. I've learned to love to be uncomfortable sometimes.
Yeah.
But the discomfort is so teeny. It's so teeny. It's not a big deal. And
Yeah, like when you see, like I'm kind of wired. So many pastors are wired that way. Like I really not naturally an extrovert. Like I'm not the life of the party. I'm comfortable in front of groups. That helps when you teach. But I've learned to be extroverted, and part of it is that I've really learned to enjoy people more than maybe I did 30 years ago or whatever. So in fact, that kind of is a good segue into there's something I do want to come back around, because I've hit you up on YouTube, like I wonder what Steve Sjogren's up to, and I just love some of the stories that you're sharing at different churches, and there is something that I'm going to ask you about, but you alluded prior to this. So we were talking before, and you had mentioned that you're in the middle of writing a book that touches on spiritual warfare and expecting resistance. So when you so in Cincinnati, so when this sort of passion, seeing God this way, and I suspect that folks were really connecting with like that Jesus, that's the Jesus that I kind of always felt was in the Bible, but didn't see him much in church, that kind of a thing. I suspect that drew people. But did you experience initially, back then, was there resistance to what you were pushing out, or how you were being led by God?
Yeah, not by the people who don't go to church, but by church people. And the more entrenched they were in church culture, I call it the container versus the contents. The more they were attached to the container, church has to look like this, and then we have to do that. And in my mind, I'm thinking, so where did you get is supposed to part? And if it goes back if it's not 100 years old or maybe 500 years old, I'm not really interested in hearing about it, because you're talking about Uncle Bob's garage church or something. I mean, that which is fine. That's fantastic. But don't try to enforce on me that culture, that container. And so we got that. We took the cross down and put up a descending dove. And if you saw that movie recently, you've seen the Calvary Chapel dove. And Vineyard came out of Calvary Chapel, by the way. And my first touch with the whole thing was Calvary Chapel, definitely not Vineyard, back in the 70s. But we got all sorts of feedback on that whole thing from church people. And then the non-church people said, why is the state of Texas up in front of where the cross used to be? It looked like the state of Texas a little bit. Okay. And so I love those kind of responses myself. And honestly, to be completely honest, I got a fair bit of negative feedback from Vineyard World too. And only from the, again, I would say entrenched, I use the term high vineyard, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but there's echelons of layers of every group. You can be a high Catholic or a casual Catholic. You can be a high Lutheran, and you can be high vineyard or medium vineyard, or whatever you want to call it. And so I've always thought that high vineyard, in other words, there's a regimented way you do this, and if you're really a vineyard, you do da da da. And it works that way with Baptists and with every single group, of course. And within every group, there's some people who say, I get it, and they don't. And
Yeah.
I had to get to the point of saying, I don't get it, and they don't get it, and none of us get it, but we're getting it bit by bit, I guess, as we go forward. And I'm not really interested in confining myself to your version of whatever it is. And I had people tell me, Dave, this is not power evangelism, and the vineyard's into power evangelism. And I said, you have obviously not gone out with us, because you will sense the presence of God. The first time you swish that toilet brush around, one complete 360, and the Spirit comes on you. And I'm kind of exaggerating, but it's about that powerful. In fact, I'm getting chills because I know how many times this happens. Janie and I went in on the grand opening of a big Larry Flint and his brother Jimmy started a what do they call it? A hustler superstore in Cincinnati, pornography stuff. And it was very controversial. People protesting, of course, Christians were. And so Janie and I went down, and on the Saturday they opened for their grand opening, we came in with our toilet kits, and there's Jimmy Flint, Larry's brother. Larry just died, in the last year or so. Whole story there too. He had a whole movie about the guy. But as we go in there, the guy says, "So you want to clean our toilets?" This is Jimmy Flint. And he has kind of a rough voice, kind of like this a little bit. And he goes, "Well, I guess so." So we go back there. Seriously, Dave, every employee is sent back to talk to us. There's only maybe 4 or 5 of them. So we slow it down so we can talk to everybody. It's only one. Yeah. We better do that again, Janie. Woo-wee. And so we get done and go up to the front. And they all said, "So tell me again, because Jimmy sent us back there to talk to you." Like they're going to get religion back there in the toilet, And what ends up happening is we go to leave, and Jimmy says, "We're just sitting here talking, and there's nobody in the store at that moment. We're just talking about how kind this is, and thank you. In fact, we decided you can have anything in the store for free." Okay. It's supposed to be funny. And I always, the way I tell the story is different than Janie. I always immediately said, "No, thank you." But Janie said, "Wait a minute." I'm just giving Janie a hard time. But a year later, get this, Dave, there's more to it. I was in New Zealand speaking at a conference. I'm coming back on the plane with my sidekick, Steve, another Steve. And sitting right in front of us is, guess who? The same guy, the Flint brother. In front of me. Okay. I mean, from New Zealand. I mean, come on. What are the chances? And I'm flying back to Ohio, of course. And we get off the plane, and we didn't really talk on the plane. I didn't want to bug the guy, but it was clearly him. He had a jacket on that had the name of the Flint Industries or something on it. We get off the plane, and he says, "Who are you people anyway?" And I said, well, we want to show God's love in a practical way, and so we clean your toilet, da da da. And he goes, "We thought you were putting a bomb in our toilet." I said, no, that's not us. And
because that was their perception of the church. Yeah,
exactly. And then he says, but who are you? And it just hit me at the moment. He asked it a second time. I said, "We're the ones that don't hate you." And he gets, no kidding, a masculine tear over here, and he says, "I didn't think there's anybody like that in town." Is that fun or what? I mean, that's what you call an avocado seed. That's not a little mustard seed. That's a biggie, And
yeah,
I haven't followed up with them since then, but I have a feeling we're going to cross paths again for sure. Jimmy.
that's so powerful. And yeah, so what it does, and I hear what you're saying, what you were alluding to a little bit earlier, like it's, and you know him better than I would, but in the early days of the vineyard, late 80s or whatever, into the early 90s, John Wimber was kind of known for running in one direction, and all of a sudden, he's going in another direction. And I don't know how much of that was personality or God calling him. I don't know, but so then people would, even in Wycliffe, and then actually I was served. I think Rick Evans. He was on the other side of Cleveland, and I was an associate pastor in that church for a while. I actually think he wrote a foreword in one of his books, I think. But like, so people would come in and maybe they were attracted to a particular flavor that they thought of, this is what the church or vineyard should look like. And if it wasn't like up to their standard or the flavor that they were drawn to, like it was a judgmental thing. And I think that happened a lot in Wycliffe. Like, I think early on, especially, like Brent Paulson, and they're still serving there. They're still doing exactly what they did, like in the best possible way. I don't mean that in an old way. Like they're serving the poor. They're just demonstrating God's love. But like he came in, and the church there in Wycliffe, Ohio, that you had been to a few times when you joined us up there conferencing, they went from being a non-instrumental Church of Christ and to a vineyard, and some of those folks were still a part of the church. So Brent had a lot of, can you imagine like the cultural clash? And so even things like getting rid of the pews was a huge deal, and we were going there at this time. Like Brent wanted to get chairs in because that was more contemporary, more comfortable for one. And there was a group that was really against getting chairs because pews were holy. And so there was, I knew the internal battle going on. And one Sunday, Brent's preaching, and that angry group was in the back of the church. They were in the back pew. They all kind of sat together. And so as Brent's preaching, you heard this creak, and the back pew, because they were all in bad shape, they're all like rotted and stuff that they all sat in, collapsed to the ground. And I remember turning, because I would turn and I look back, and all I saw were legs sticking up. And shortly after that, the chair campaign went further. So further, but more than deeper than just it being a furniture issue, it was more a kingdom issue. And it was more the way that people saw God. And maybe in some ways the pews represented hanging on to something that wasn't necessarily biblical, and but afraid of losing it. Like they were afraid of losing me. So so there, I think there was some spiritual warfare in that regard too, even especially within the church.
That's where it usually happens. Here's a thought. I was praying the Lord's Prayer recently, and it hit me. Every single pronoun there is plural, not individual. Our Father, forgive us. Our, ours, us, we. I mean, the whole thing. I think it's 6 plural pronouns, and so the whole idea is getting along with others. And this is a whole slightly different topic here, but I'm speaking on Sunday at a Renegade Vineyard church over in Anaheim. And, the Anaheim Vineyard, that whole story is very controversial, but there's a few churches that have spun off from that. And I'm going to speak at one of them. And I'm talking about what I saw when I died. I don't know if you want to go there, Dave, or not, but in micro brief, what I saw when I died, I there it is, the day I died. Yes, thank you. That's a great plug for the book. Worth reading. I've written a number of books, but the 2 that at the top of the list I recommend are The Day I Died, and then a book on outreach, Conspiracy of Kindness. But as in the course of things, what I saw was, I'm jumping way ahead in my own story, was the voice of God speaking through people, but a whole an unbelievable, uncountable number of faces that look like a sunflower. And as you look at it, they're more like pixels. And each pixel you would see on a TV screen, if you take a magnifying glass out, there's just pixels, there's millions of them. And as you look at it, you realize, there's a little pixel there. And there's a little Dave Welker there. And then there's Steve, and there's Janie, almost like Miss Whatever on Romper Room, and I can see Steve. And what I begin to realize is that it isn't just about us theoretically, but I believe that there's all sorts of biblical evidence for this, is that we're going to be in tight quarters with each other. And it would be a good idea, and just to kind of get in that the flow of things now, and learn to love other people that love Jesus, even though they drive us crazy. And you know, and the political environment we have going on now, obviously, is a huge part of it. And so, but yeah, so if you want to tune in next about Monday, you can see my Easter message.
Yeah, look forward to it.
Yeah.
In fact, what I'll do, because this will go, I'm kind of backlogging some of these videos, and so this will probably go up like after Easter, maybe that week. But after, I'll put a link in. If it's okay, I'll find that message and I'll put it like in the subject matter below on YouTube and Facebook. So yeah, perfect.
Sounds great.
Yeah. So so in fact, while we're on the subject of books, the very first one you have, The Conspiracy of Kindness. I don't have in front of me, but I do have the day, it's your account, the day I died. And I remember you saying that you actually died twice, right? Like once, I guess, wasn't keeping you down, so you had to do it again. But it's an amazing, like what it is, like people in a world that's fascinated with life after death, supernatural, like somebody can see that and be like, well, is that like legit? It's really awesome to read a book from somebody that they're like telling the truth. They didn't create a book to to be on a New York Times bestseller. Like, this is what you lived and died and lived again. Like, so I would encourage that. And I'll put a link in to stevesjogren.com below as well. That way there folks can maybe tap in to some of the things you're doing, what's going on, Kingdom Explosion, see what you're up to. I don't know if you have like book resources, but I know you sell on Amazon. So I don't know the best way to get the books into people's hands, but is it Amazon?
Amazon. While you're talking, let me grab that book. I have it right here in my vast library here. This one. Okay, here we go. Uncle Steve here. You got it here. Okay. First of all, the one you were just mentioning is actually now called Making a Good Church Great. The one you're holding up. So that would be confusing.
Oh, this is an older one. Okay.
Older cover, older. We made a few changes, but this is it. Making a Good Church Great. Steve Sjogren. Okay. Here is the other book, Conspiracy of Kindness, and I totally recommend that. It's a book that I think that God decided He wanted to write a book, and He let me write the words on it. And I don't feel that way about all my books, but that one I absolutely do. That there's something there that'll outlast my life, I think. And here it is in Russian, by the way, if you happen to read Cyrillic.
Oh, that's awesome. So, you know what? And I'm going to say this because my father-in-law, I think he watches some of my videos. I don't know. But he was a leader back in the Wycliffe Vineyard. He was really impacted by what you brought to that church. And I think it's okay that I would say this because he's not embarrassed of this. But I think he'd be encouraged by me saying this. Like I think he has like maybe an 8th grade like education, and he would say so. He knows the Bible because he listened to it on cassette tape back in the day, over and over. Sure. So he knows the Bible mainly because of that. But he would say the only book that he's ever read in his entire life, from front to back, is Conspiracy of Kindness. Really? That's the only book. Oh. Yeah, and he's in his 70s now. So formational. And how about this one? Changing the world through kindness. Is this one still around?
Absolutely.
And then we have servant warfare, which I know you're working on another book about spiritual warfare.
Okay, the one you just mentioned, Servant Warfare, is a great title. And we retitled it just because I don't know why we did, but the one you showed right before that, Changing the World Through Kindness, that actually is about spiritual warfare. And it's still in print in that title and so forth. But it's the gist of it is that we could do spiritual warfare by, if you will, praying. And people talk about all sorts of vocabulary with that whole thing of vertical spiritual warfare and thin then heavens and, whatever God is nearby at that place and da da da. But on the other hand, I think we can go forward at a horizontal level, parallel level, and we can, I think, faster accomplish spiritual warfare. But how about if we did both at the same time? We're praying as we go out. And
Yeah.
but I was just telling you, Dave, right before we started recording, that I was out with some friends the other day giving away groceries to street people. It's been raining like crazy. We've been giving away ponchos because the police show up. They take all of their accrued blankets that we'd already given them, coat or for people, and on it goes, and they just throw it in the trash. And why would you do that in the middle of a rainstorm? We have our orders. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not against the police at all, but I think it takes a little bit of common sense on occasion too. So we called the mayor, and he goes, "That will not happen again." That's pretty cool. And we're talking on the way, getting out of the car to give away the groceries, where these poor guys had their stuff all ripped out. And we said, you got to be careful because this is spiritual warfare. When you do, pushbacks against darkness, you can get some kickback, blowback, if you will. And within 5 minutes, I had stepped on a rock and turned my ankle, broke my ankle in 2 places. So just got back about an hour before we recorded this and was at the foot doctor, and they casted my ankle to my knee down, so spiritual warfare, man, it's for real stuff. And as you said, David, I am writing a book right now on that. I'm not going to give you the title, but it's, I think, the very best title I've ever had. And it's a memoir of discoveries I've made as a result of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And I've been treated for that for numbers of years now. And I'm pretty much back to complete normal. That was my little, okay. But in the gist of it, what I'm saying is, again, as it is in this book, is we give away the kingdom of God. As we go the direction that God is going, we're going to get pushback. It's going to be that way always. The good news is that pushback lets us go forward. It's an ironic truth, but we've seen that so many times in outreach over and over and over again. The pushback leads to anointing, leads to blessing. It's a cool thing.
Yeah. It's almost like, so what the enemy designs to push back ends up pushing forward, right? It's kind of how
that's right.
It's a kingdom like concept. It's kind of how
That's
God
right.
does his thing. That's awesome.
Yeah. With that,
so
if it was, you have to have something on the glass to get some traction, otherwise you're just spinning your wheels on the glass slickness of it. So, yeah.
And so one of the things I'm gleaning from this conversation that you made a point a little bit ago is like having the both and, like that we're seeking the lead. We want to partner with what the Holy Spirit's doing in our communities. And depending on your community, that could look very different. Like we don't want to presume, we don't want to like force our agenda that we believe to be God, but rather let's discern what the Holy Spirit's already doing and partner with him in the working in people's lives. And the only way that not the only, but I think one of the main ways, we can't do that if we're not involved in people's lives.
Right.
Like we've got to be out talking to people and dialoguing with people. Otherwise, I think we're just kind of getting our own agenda out there. And I think it's frustrating. It's ineffective. When we were in Minnesota serving at a vineyard church in a town called Mankato, which is, if folks are a fan of Little House on the Prairie, it wasn't far from Walnut Grove, and the big town they would go to would be Mankato. So, so we lived there for 5.5 years, and it was a college town, and there was a coffee shop called the Fill-In Station. I tend to like those like off the beat, less franchise coffee places. The private, I think you get. I think there's a different type of person that hangs out there, and they have really good coffee. But one of the baristas was a transgender. It was a guy who I just gotten to know I ended up being intentional about going there because we just connected, and I kind of sensed that God was wanting to do something in this person's life. And so I'd go in, built a relationship. Eventually, my cover was blown as being a pastor in town, but by then we had already had this connection. and like dialogue about life. Like he would tell me things that he did over the week, and his niece's birthday, and it must have been like we connected at a level. And in that, like God gave me like heart for this person. Now so what ended up happening. I had a meeting with a church leader. We ended up going to a different place rather than the filling station for breakfast. And we're sitting there, and who walks into this little diner but that barista and a couple of his friends. And they sat at a table. I wasn't sure if he'd recognize me outside the element, but I said to the leader I was with, his name was Cody. I said, Cody, before we go, let's go say hi to him. And so and went over to his table, and I said, hey, I don't know if you remember, I'm Dave. I visit you there. He's like, oh, of course I do. And I said, I just want you to know that like you're so kind that when I come to your coffee house, like you're so kind and relational that it really impacts the rest of my day. I just want you to know that. And like that was the last thing he expected probably out of a pastor's mouth. I learned about his hardship in the church, and he was jaded and all that. And he first didn't say anything. He couldn't talk. And then he said, like in a scratchy voice, he said, thank you. He didn't have anything else to say. But our talks about like real life and God, like went to a deeper level after that.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's called what I call digging for the gold, partnering with what God is doing in the community. But we've got to be in the community to be doing it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to hand the ball off to you because I think I'm talking too much here. But one of the things you said in Wycliffe Vineyard, and I know it's not something I heard on a podcast with you. I remember you saying it in the church. You talked about how at the time in the Vineyard, we were like really big on big gatherings and prophetic gatherings and like praying, healing, like all these things that were really exciting and expressions of the kingdom. And you told a story about how you had been a part of a gathering, and like everybody, it was charged atmosphere, and the people like marched around the church and made the declarations and all these things and all these spiritual things. We're going to take over the city for God. And then after the service, everybody went to Friendlies and had a Fruity Fribble. I remember you saying Friendlies and Fruity Fribble. Like there was where did it go from there? Right. Yeah. So I like that both and like but in order to be a part of what God's doing, we've got to be a part of people's lives.
Absolutely. And here's a thought. I think it happens better and easier and more naturally when we do it together with people. And so, in fact, I was just talking to these folks we've been going out and giving away groceries with. And I said, most people are not on their own going to do this because it's just too much of a jump. And I wouldn't have done it on my own if it hadn't been for me being so frustrated and ready to hang up my spurs, at the door. But I began to see that if I go with another person and do an outreach of some sort, here's another way to put it, an excuse to connect with somebody, an excuse. I was just by today, I didn't go in, but it's a friend of mine actually is a regional manager for Big Lots stores. And those are everywhere, I think, now. And we've gone into Big Lots before and just said, we're going to spend $20 and figure out a kind of an experiment to see how much can we buy of cool stuff to give away. Okay. And because you can look at it and go, oh, I could do da-da-da with that. Or, da-da-da would do with that, da-da-da. There's a line by Robert Schuller. Not everybody remembers Robert Schuller perhaps, but he was a major, before Joel Osteen, he was the Sunday morning guy and had a church here in LA called the Crystal Cathedral. But he had so many amazing things to say about how to start from scratch. And he said, see a need and meet it, find a hurt and heal it. It didn't get any simpler than that. See a need and meet it, find a hurt and heal it. And I can't do that by myself most of the time. But if I get Janie to go with me, if I get Dave Welker to go with me, I mean, we may get arrested. We're having so much fun because in Ohio, there's a lot of things that are illegal that are fun. That might be more true for Cincinnati, actually. There's been so many controversial national stories in Cincinnati. The lady who had been to our church who fed parking meters, you might have heard that story some years ago. She got arrested and made national news. And I mean, It's just funny, who knew that it was illegal to feed a parking meter in Cincinnati?
I remember seeing it on the news where
Yeah.
I'm sitting at my in-laws and like the story comes on in Cincinnati and it caught our eye right away. Like people are doing something kind. And then I'm like, wait a minute, that's Steve Sjogren. That's the Cincinnati Vineyard.
Wait, just a cotton picking minute. Hold your horses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You hit the they were losing revenue because they couldn't create citations. So
It's just crazy.
Man.
We the line became famous among ourselves anyway. It's so much fun. It's almost illegal in Cincinnati. That same crew that coined that term, this crew, they went in on Christmas Eve. You have time for one more song?
Yeah.
Story
Sure
song.
do.
At no point will I begin with the song. We give out donuts on Christmas Eve to people to give away as part of their Christmas Eve celebration. Go to places that have to work, that require to work, filling stations, restaurants here and there, gas stations, AA centers, hospitals, So we literally, because you got a lot of people coming on Christmas Eve, give away hundreds of dozens of donuts, and they're Krispy Kreme, so they're pretty good donuts. And on it goes. You have to order them a week in advance so they can crank them out there at the last minute. But one crew went over to they went off the reservation, if you will. They saw a Waffle House on the side of the road. And they said, let's go in there and we'll serve them the donuts. The people there, we'll serve the employees. This is before Waffle House started becoming famous for breaking up fights and chairs flying across the thing. And the lady does that, the chair goes flying. And man, she's a tough broad. I mean, you don't want to mess with her. I tell you what.
No, you don't.
Anyway, they go in and one guy goes back and starts washing the dishes. Other people clear the tables. The dishwasher guy goes, "Who are you?" And he goes, "Oh, we're from the Vineyard. And we're here to show you God's love. Take a break." The guy goes, "Okay." He's out in the parking lot smoking a cigarette when the manager comes back. And so the manager comes back and goes, "What's going on?" "Well, Bill's smoking in the parking lot. Where these other guys are cleaning the tables." "Well, where's everybody?" Anyway, he says, "Yeah, it's Christmas Eve. Go for it." So we're having this all go on. It's great fun. And then somebody goes, "Let's get out some money and play music on the jukebox." And so he puts in a bunch of dollar bills. They play strictly Motown music. And, there's, like it or not, Motown music is always positive in my, experience. It's always uplifting in the end of the song. They said, "We're going to make everybody here dance on Christmas Eve." Well, Christmas Eve by themselves, each table, one person, because they don't get along with their families, whatever the case is. So they're sitting there eating like this and, kind of like they're in trouble. And people are pulling, "Hey, you got to dance with us." "I can't dance. I'm depressed. It's Christmas." So they're making them get up and they're, "Okay, if you insist, I'll do my elbow. That's all I can do is my elbow dance, whatever." Anyway, so it goes on and the whole place is dancing. It goes on for 45 minutes, the whole thing. They leave. About 2 weeks later, I get a call. "Hello, there's a psychiatrist wants to talk to you." I go, "Not again." No. But this time I talked to the guy and he goes, "Hi, my name's Dr. Two of my patients that didn't even know each other happened to be at the Waffle House that night. They didn't even know each other. And they both have reported how encouraging that was. It was the highlight of the last, number of Christmases. And I've been so encouraged. I lowered their dosage of antidepressants because they're that encouraged." And he got a little emotional. I go, "I just want to call to thank you." And I thought I was in trouble. And I'm getting chills, because
like, does our insurance policy cover this? Right, like this lawsuit that's that's awesome.
Yeah.
Huh.
So you make deposits, and when you go to make a withdrawal, there's something there. And I think the church very often we're trying to make a withdrawal and we've made zero deposits. In fact, we owe money. It's like in St. Vincent, if you've seen that movie with Bill Murray, he goes in to withdraw all of his money out of his account. He goes, "How much is it?" $257. "Oh man, that all?" She goes, "No, you don't understand. This is zero. Here's $257. You owe us $257.
Oh man.
You have to get back up to zero, and then you can go above that.
Yeah,
And
that is.
it's a great movie. It's worth watching. But I think that we've got to be the people who are willing to, um, look silly sometimes. Be generous all the time. Uh,
Yeah.
Love and accept and
Yeah.
hug, even though we don't agree necessarily. And as
Yeah.
Rick Warren says, acceptance does not mean approval, and I agree with that necessarily. That we don't have to be on the same page with everybody, but we can accept them for
Mhm.
Pete's sake, because that's just what Jesus
Yeah.
does.
And the reality is, if that is our understanding, if God looks like us, eats like us, smells like us, votes like us, we're probably worshiping a God of our own making,
Yeah.
like as opposed to like the God we find in the Bible and that
Right.
we experience. That is, Steve, you've given us a lot of gold.
Mm.
And so anyone who's like catching this, it'll be on Facebook, YouTube. I'd encourage you to share it. This is so encouraging. And in fact, if you've got stories like Steve's telling or ideas, like if you want to include in comments ways that your church is engaging the community, just different ideas, I'd encourage you to do that. Comment below. Our comments will be on so folks can read it. And there'll be a link to stevesjogren.com below, a link to where you can get his books. Be on the lookout for I'm looking forward to reading that next one. That sounds really, really good. And yeah, just check it out. And let's be about the work that Jesus is doing. And I think this could be really timely. And you're touching on some things, Steve, especially going into this next season, right?
Yeah.
Like I know a lot of pastors are like, oh, here we go. Like with the whole,
Election stuff.
politics.
Yeah.
Yeah. But as a church, if we can like look at all of life, including our politics, through a kingdom lens, all of a sudden, like rather than being brought down by it, like we can understand that God is about bringing change and about bringing hope and about bringing life. And my encouragement will be my encouragement to our church at Crossway Vineyard, but for any of you guys that are connecting with this, like be about that. Be about what Jesus is doing in our communities. And you know what? It'll be messy along the way. Like if real life is happening and we're really in each other's lives, pews will be broken, and it'll be messy, but it'll be so life-giving. One of the real quick to the one of the things I shared recently, Steve, at our church is how like the church is when you think about healthy church, people like we should be doing life with people that don't, have a different amount in their bank account, vote differently, eat differently, look differently. Like that's such a healthy picture. And I think we get a more fuller picture of who God is when we're a community like that. And some of it's really intentional and it's being willing to like be awkward at times and be willing to walk through messes. One of the churches, when we were part of the Rick Evans church up in the Cleveland area, the West Side, I remember at one point, it was a healthy, like we were growing, we were really diverse socioeconomically. And one of the guys and one of our leaders, he was successful. He drove like the coolest, and I'm not a car person, but he drove the coolest black BMW Roadster. I mean, it was pretty sweet. And I would pull in next to him in my Chevy Lumina. And sometimes the door didn't really close all the way.
I can see
So
that
I would
too.
be driving. Yeah, I'd be like driving to church holding the door closed. But I love the fact that my Lumina could be parked next to his Roadster. Sometimes you can tell a lot about the inside of a church by looking at the parking lot.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Agree.
it takes it being intentional. But so I guess you've given us a lot to just kind of think about and pray about and be encouraged. And if you were going to give us and I'm putting you on the spot a little bit because you've given us a ton, but in ending this, is there, if you could say one thing to the local church, like to end the conversation, what would there be, like one thing we could land
on? I think we need maybe a lot of new mantras to keep us on track. But I think the one that we ought to really most seriously take into heart is ready, fire, aim. Ready, fire, aim. Because we are, as humans, but I think especially as Christians, because we love to think and study and conjure this and that. But my thinking is, if we just go to our own nature, it'll be ready, aim, ready, aim, ready, aim, ready, aim. We'll never get to pulling the trigger. And so ready, fire, aim. It kind of makes sense. It's biblical. Are you really ready? Well, God, here I am. Boom. It happens like that. You don't get a little gentle, very slow slope. It doesn't work that way. The slope is boo. And so it almost always works that ready, fire, and then reflection at the end, or aim.
Yeah.
So I think it's worth grabbing onto. And I say, let's stop doing the ready, aim, ready, aim, ready, aim. We'll never be ready, So pull the trigger.
Oh, that's so true, isn't it? Like that's foundationally true. We can get stuck in the aim, ready, aim, and we think that we've been successful.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, like we never pull a trigger.
Right.
I was just thinking about like how even in multiplying ministry and multiplying leaders, it's kind of like having a baby. If you're waiting for the perfect time to have a baby, you never have one.
That's right.
But so it's kind of like that too. That's awesome. Well, thanks, Steve. Hey, if you're ever, I know you're on the West Coast, but you travel a bunch, but if you're ever in Ohio, in the Cincinnati area again, or wherever, I'll reach out. Maybe we can get coffee sometime.
I would love it. I'll be there in the summer. Actually, we're doing and this plugs my last plug, Kindness Explosion. Think of kindnessexplosion.com. kindnessexplosion.com. We're doing these around the country. We have 3 different teams now, West Coast, East Coast, and Texas. And we are going around doing these one day, well, actually it's only half a day events, and doing lots of different outreach stuff. If you go to that site, you can watch my video. And at the end of it, we have our own 20-foot tall inflatable toilet. Because we love cleaning toilets at gas stations. And it says on the back of it, make kindness great again. And so
that's awesome.
A little bit of fun still. The red hats are still going on. So we're having a little bit of fun poking things there. Make kindness great again. And people honk their horns, and why are you doing that? We think Jesus is cleaning toilets today. Oh my word! I've always believed in that kind of a Jesus. Back to where we started.
Yeah, I'll look it up. So, Are you going to be in the Cincinnati area with one of those kindness explosions?
Kindness explosions, yes. Ideally, we haven't nailed down a date yet, but it'll be probably late July. We're looking at. Okay. Yeah, I'll keep it. I'll keep it up online so people see it. So.
Yeah, maybe it's something that I can maybe a group from Urbana can maybe make it. Cincinnati's not too far away.
We're doing it with a bunch of vineyards for one. Yeah, vineyards will be involved in it in Cincinnati. So.
I'm sure we'll probably hear about it. Oh, that's so cool. Now you got to be careful though, because eventually what's going to happen, people are going to be pulling over to gas stations, not to fill their tank, but just to use the bathroom. Like the gas station bathrooms are so that's the place to use the bathroom. So they're so wonderful.
That's right. That's right. I could tell you stories. We nicknamed the worst bathrooms, but I won't go into that right now. The worst one ever, though, I'll tell you that, is the Black Hole of Calcutta. That was a bad bathroom. It was in America, not Calcutta, but we jokingly called it.
Yeah, bad things that were in that bathroom. Awesome. Thanks again, Steve. Appreciate you, and we'll look forward to seeing more stuff.
Thanks, David. God bless you, man.
Yeah.
Okay.
You too.
Bye-bye.